and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on this show. This is episode 19, and today we'll be exploring the topic of happier life, of happier wife, and her top 4 needs. This show is brought to you by KingsleyGrant.com. Our hope is that you will be challenged, inspired, and encouraged in this episode as in every other episode, so stay tuned.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage World? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage Podcast. Today, we're talking about what a wife needs to feel happier in her marriage, and you may or may not agree with what I have to say, but you can always share your thoughts through a comment or an email. You might be triggered by some of what I share, but remember, that is one of the purpose of this show, right? To stir things up and then take you in for a safe landing. So make sure whatever you do, stick around to the end because I have a special gift for you, whether you agree with me or not, but I still have a special gift for you just because you are here listening to this episode. Thanks for joining me for this episode. As you've already heard, we're talking about what a wife needs to feel happier in her marriage. Now, I've categorized 4 needs that you as a wife have that I've experienced as a husband of more than 3 decades and my professional work as a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach for the past 15 years. I have kind of experienced so many relationships where so many couples, hundreds and hundreds that I've worked with over the last several years, have kind of given me different ways to look at what they're looking for, especially the wife. And so I'm sharing with you these 4 needs that I believe are top 4 needs that I believe if you as a wife have, you will be happier in your marriage. And you can check me on this, right? If at some point you said, that's not true, Kingsley. Well, check me on that. Let me know. I would love to hear from you because these are needs that I will be sharing with you. And they're not in any specific order, but they are, I believe, necessary to fulfill the happier wife, happier life script, right? So here we go then and sharing with you these 4. Now, as I mentioned before, they're not in any particular order, but I believe the first one is one of the top most important of all 4. And you'll see what I mean when you hear me mention. So number 1 need I believe that you as a wife need is to feel secure in your relationship. So I would say number 1 is security, right? Feeling secure, I believe, is so important for you as a wife. And again, let me know if your thoughts are otherwise. After listened and counseled, like I mentioned, with so many couples, mainly the wife, as she shares with me, one of the things she's looking for, and she may not use the word security at first, but when I listen to what she have to say, I'm hearing her saying, I want to feel more secure in my relationship. Now, what does that mean? What does it really mean that she's asking for? I'll ask the question, well, what do you mean by security, right? And she will say that, I want to know that my husband have my back. I want to feel safe with him. I want to feel that wherever I am, wherever he is, that our relationship is top of mind, is a priority. I want to know when I'm out with him that he doesn't throw me under the bus, especially when I'm with his family, especially if there's a, in-law issue going on. I'll give you an example. I spoke to a couple recently, and what I heard in that session was where the wife, she is at odds with the husband's parents, because especially the dad, because they had an issue, right? They had a disagreement, And the wife is very, and this is how he describes her. She agrees. She admits that this is who she is. And if you, as you're listening, maybe you can identify, but she is a pretty, she's sure of herself. She's confident. She is like a very straightforward person. She doesn't kind of sugarcoat what she have to say. And that's one of his issue as well, because he feel like she is not diplomatic. And he's more that diplomatic person that dances around things. And, he wants to have everybody be happy. She really is a straight shooter. And that's one of the things he kind of was saying, it makes him feel very uncomfortable. So what happened was that in the situation where his dad is also pretty straightforward, very, very sugarcoat things as well. Now, it's almost like two bulls in a china shop, right? As you've heard this saying goes. And so what happened was they kind of disagreed and they got at it. Now, most times those two personalities, they are just seeing it as normal to stand toe to toe, basically, and having disagreement and be strong about their position. Now, if you are not like that, you look in and you're thinking that, man, they are at it. There are a World War III is about to begin, but it's not really so for them. But anyway, the point is that, the father said some things that were uncalled for and almost showed his wife, this man, his wife, that he really wasn't fond of her. And she got offended by that. She felt kind of like, I'm your daughter-in-law and I was hoping to be embraced in the family, but that wasn't happening. And what happened was the husband, as he looked on, he felt like he's caught between a rock and a hard place, because he loves his wife, but he loves his parents, his dad. He didn't know what to do. So he froze, right? Oh, fight, flight, freeze. He froze. And he really didn't say anything. He looked away. He kind of walked away. He didn't really have much to say. And she just kind of shut down. She shut down because, she was at their home. And so she feel like, I just want to get away. Just take me home. That was her kind of her attitude, and her body language was like, just take me out of here. But the husband was, it's kind of smoothing things over and acting as if not much happened. And she didn't feel like as if he had her back. And so what happened was it began to, this happened like years ago. So years later, this is still in her system. And so her belief was formed that he didn't make her feel secure. No, she felt like he didn't make her feel secure, and he would throw her under the bus if needs be, just to be nice, and wasn't protective of her. And so what she needed was security. She needed to feel secure. Doesn't mean he's going to agree with her, but at least he would somehow step up to a place where she felt secure, and she didn't feel that way. I believe that wife wanted at that time, she wanted to feel as if her husband was her protector, right? Her protector. And that is one aspect of security. Another aspect of security for her, it would be as a provider, that he is going to provide for her, provide a place. Now, sometimes, I agree, some wives, they are in a better position financially and they may have a better job, and I get it. But at the same time, in the back of her head, even though she may be making more money, she wants to still feel as if he's going to still provide. He's still going to be there, and, whatever happens, he's going to make a way to make her feel as if anything happens, he will make a way to provide for her, right? Provide the security, provide a sense of peace and calm, and have her back kind of thing. Provide that for her, protect her, provide. But also, she wants to feel secure. She wants his presence. She wants to make sure that he's there when she needs him. That is, I believe, is what security looks like. And I believe when a wife has that, then she, happier wife, happier life, right? And I believe it leads to a happier marriage. And that's the first thing I have to mention. Now, the second one I believe of the four needs is she needs attention, right? You as a wife need attention from your husband. Why do I hear many times, and this is what I've heard firsthand from wives who will say, the reason why, especially if she had an affair, she said, I began to get attention from some other men because my husband wouldn't give me the attention. He wouldn't say anything about how I look. He would not compliment me. He would not tell me I look nice. None of that happened, right? So she felt like, okay, some other men came along and he began to pay her attention. And she began to feel like a woman. She felt like, at least somebody is seeing something that my husband isn't seeing or isn't saying. Even if he saw it, he's not saying anything. Now, here's what I find, that sometimes it's difficult, especially for some men who are not affectionate, right? Like myself, as an example. I grew up in a culture and in a home where my dad didn't show affection. It was lacking in my home. So I learned by watching that my dad, that, he really wasn't that, sad to say, he wasn't that attentive person. And so what happened was, with my mom, he just wasn't there. And again, I want to make sure that I say this, that my dad, to give him some credit, he didn't get that from his own family. His dad died when he was very young, so he didn't really see what that looked like, right? He didn't really have any model of what affection looks like. And so when he died very young, and so what he had to do was step up to the plate and be his mom, right? Had to help his mom basically raise his siblings. And so he really was that kind of had to step up as a imagine what it's like for my dad, right? Imagine what it was like for him, where he felt like, I got to be the man. I got to bring my siblings, my sisters and my brothers into kind of I would say subjection. So he was a very kind of a guy who was very disciplinarian, very that's what he was all about, right? And so it became very, very difficult. So my dad, that's all he learned, and so affection was not something that he kind of gave my mom. And so I that's my model. That's what I saw. And it was very difficult for me to, I know my wife needed attention, and I know it's within me. I wanted to say and share with her as much as I could, but it was very difficult. It was something that I did not grow up with, as a matter of fact. So it's, and because my love language was not affection per se, and so my wife it was very challenging for me, but I know that she needs that. And so, thank God I've learned, she's taught me how to be better in the area of affection. She's actually, taken my hands and wrapped around her and hugged her. And thank God my wife is not one that is going to make yes, she needs that, but she understands that, I love her, but I'm lacking in this as a deficit for me. And some relationships, some wives, I get it. They're starving for that. And they need that husband to let them know how, pretty they are, and that they are, they're sexual or sensual. They need to hear something, right? And as a wife, that you want to hear that. So what happens is that you go outside the relationship and you begin to hear it, and you begin to get that from someone else, and one thing leads to another, and then before you know, what happened is that you end up in a situation that you never thought you would have ended up with. So not only does, I mentioned before, a wife needs security, she also needs attention, right? She needs to be hugged, to be held. Now, I'm speaking in a broad term, because some wives don't need this, right? They're not necessarily the type, because I've met and talked to some wives who said, I'm okay. I don't need to be, because she's not the huggy type, that's not her personality. But that's the rare thing, right? But for the most part, I believe they need wives, for them to have a happier life. She needs to have the attention from her husband. She needs him to let her know that she is the center of attention for him, right? Because when she doesn't get that, she began to think, well, is he giving that to somebody else, right? And all these different thoughts begin to percolate in her mind. So that's very important of the four things. So the first thing was security. Second thing was attention. The third is communication. Now, I'm saying this because I've heard it. I don't necessarily agree or believe it, but I hear that women, I guess there's no scientific studies that was done. I don't know where it started, but women speak each day. She had to speak like 15,000 words. And so men needs to be 5,000. And so at the end of the day, she have her 10,000 left and she wants to dump it all on him. And it's like, I just, I just want to break. I want to break, right? I believe that she wants, as a wife, right? You want your husband to communicate, right? It's not just about just surface thing, I've heard many wives said this, that I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what he really wants. He doesn't talk. Actually, this is the number one reason most couples, when they come in for any kind of therapy, and they will say, I ask a question, so what can we work on? And they will almost always say, our communication. We just don't communicate. And so what she wants to hear from him. She wants to hear his heart. But what happens is sometimes as men, we don't necessarily want to share our hearts, right? We want to work through things. We want to muscle our way through, and we've got to figure it out. Because if we don't, it's less than a man if we had to feel like we just don't know, and we don't want to give the impression we just don't know even what we're feeling. We don't know how to communicate that as well. So, but she wants to hear. She wants to know. Now, again, as I said, going back to my own relationship, thank God my wife, we do have communication. We try to find times along the way to make these deposits along the way where it's not all piled up. And so I don't necessarily feel the pressure, right? But I try. And again, I have to make sure that you understand that I'm coming from a place of training, right? So I've been trained this way. I've kind of trained myself because of my training and helping other couples. So I am not the typical guy in that regard. And I'm not trying to hold myself up as a standard. I'm just simply saying I have a better, my self-awareness is a bit different because I have that background. And I know I want to make sure I put that out there just in case you're thinking that, of course, Kingsley, you're a licensed marriage and family therapist. You are a relationship coach. You should know all these things. And you're right? But I'm just saying to you that not all relationship where every wife need this, right? But for the most part, she wants to hear him talk about his day and what's happening in his life and his plans and his goals, his aspirations, his hurt, what scares him, what his fears are. And she wants that kind of communication. He doesn't want to talk about that because, again, it's to admit that he's weak or is a failure. That's not what he wants, but it's necessary, right? It's necessary. So it's important then that if a wife is going to happier life, she needs mutual communication. She needs her husband to be talking to her, not at her, right? But talking with her, talking to her, and making her feel as if she's part of him and she is knowing what's going on in his mind, in his heart, right? So again, we started by saying the first thing I mentioned was she needs security. The second thing is attention. The third thing is communication. Now, this last one I'm going to mention, it may be a bit tricky because in our world, I believe we have shifted away from this for a lot of times, right? We've shifted away from this unfortunately, but I believe, and I'm going to say this very strongly, because I'm looking not only through a scientific lens, I'm also looking through a biblical lens, right? A Christian lens, as you very much, have you listened to me, this is going to come up, that I believe a wife needs leadership, right? You say, Kingsley, wait a minute. Are you saying she's not a leader? No, I didn't say that, right? She doesn't need lordship, right? Well, of course she needs that. If she's submitted to God, she needs God to be her, to be the Lord of her life. That's a whole different story. So I'm not talking about that. We all need lordship. I need to be submitted to God, and so is a wife, and so hopefully so do you. And that's the lordship. But when it comes to a wife, she needs her husband to be the leader. Now, I have seen in the case of some wives where they feel as if they have to take that leadership role because the husband may not be stepping up, and if they don't, they feel like things are going to fall apart. I get it. But I've found that very same wife will say to me, I'm tired. I'm tired of being the one who's always leading, always coming up with the ideas, always being proactive. I do it, but I'm tired of it. I wish my husband would, right? I wish my husband would. So a wife needs, because I believe it's inbuilt. I believe God built into a woman this need for having a man. See, here we go, Kingsley. Here we go. This is dangerous ground because are you saying there, a wife, this woman, she needs a. Yes, I'm saying that, not because I'm saying it, because God says it. God says, and again, this is where it's, sometimes I can get, people can get in trouble, but I'm just, I don't care because it's what God says. He said a wife should submit to her her husband, as a husband submits to God, right, to Christ. So there's a hierarchy that God set up. Now, if you have a problem with that, go argue that with God. But God says, this is the order. And when this order is somehow violated, that we've seen so much in our society because of feminism and this liberation kind of mentality and progressiveness, we know, a woman would say, I don't need a man in my life. Of course you do, right? And we have this whole cultural shift. I believe what we're reaping today and experiencing in our world is this very thing. When we take men from the leadership position that God intended for him to be in the home as a leader, right? Because this doesn't mean lordship. Again, I mentioned before, a leader is the one that says, hey, I'm going to be the one out there. If I need to get in the battlefront, I'm going to lead. You think about in the military, what the military leaders do, right? They are going to lead by example. They're going to get out there with their men and women who are in the battle, and they're going to fight alongside, but they're going to lead and sacrifice and put themselves in those positions because they're true leaders. I heard someone said, I think it was Simon Sinek, who wrote a book about leaders eat last, right? He's talking about what leadership looks like. And so when I'm talking about leadership here, it may be that very thing, that he as a leader would eat last to make sure his family have something. Which wife would not want her husband to sacrifice and put himself at the back to protect from the back? And if needs be, protect from the front. That's what leadership does. She wants that in her husband. Doesn't mean that he's going to always be the one that, in every area like finances and spiritual things. There might be a time when that may not be his strength, but she wants to know that he's involved and engaged, because that creates also security for her, right? It creates security for her. And I believe that when men or husbands step up to the plate, it makes her feel as if, wow, I can feel safe with my husband. He's leading our family. He's modeling with the kids what it should look like. And I feel safe. I feel like I have a strong man in my home. Now, I know this can create, I think sometimes, controversy, because you may not agree, and that's okay. But I believe that God, who knows all things, had a reason and why he put it that way. So when a person pushed back on me on this, I said, well, hey, you can take it up with God and argue with him. But I know God's ways are always the best way. God knows best, right? Because he is the one who created men and women. And so he knows what's best for them. And he said, this whole idea of hierarchy, he said, a woman, she needs her husband to be that to her. And so she needs leadership. And again, I want to emphasize not lordship, where he comes and feel like she is her servant. She is his servant and should be always at his beck and call. That's not leadership. That's dictatorship. That's dictatorship. She doesn't need a dictator, right? No one does, but she needs a leader, right? She needs a leader. And of course, I'm not doing a leadership talk here, and you can go and look up what true leadership is all about. And you will see the reason why I believe a happier life needs a man to be a leader. Now, so I do know that this may create some controversy, may trigger you, but it's okay. That's what this show is all about, right? So again, there's 4 needs I believe that a wife needs from her husband: happier wife, happier life. And 4 needs: security, I mentioned. She needs attention. She needs communication. She needs leadership, right? Right. So I would love to hear from you. Which of these 4 do you agree with or don't you agree with? And you can always, communicate through email or comments. You can share that. But you can also listen to how you can share your thoughts and your feedback with us at Happier Marriage Podcast. So listen up.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1, make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2, subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3, get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.